She was dismissed as unworthy at her mother-in-law's birthday celebration because of her modest appearance, her very presence an affront to the elite family who believed their son deserved better. But when her billionaire husband stood up for her and dropped a bombshell truth, every arrogant relative who had judged her was left utterly speechless. The Harrison estate on Beacon Hill carried the weight of 5 generations of Boston banking elite, a family that had weathered the Great Depression by foreclosing on their neighbors and emerged even wealthier. Inside, Sarah Harrison's 70th birthday celebration wasn't just a party. It was a ritual reaffirmation of their social standing, a tradition as calculated as their investment portfolios. The family dynasty had always operated on carefully orchestrated marriages that consolidated wealth and influence. James's grandfather had married into shipping, his father into politics, and James himself had been groomed since childhood to continue this legacy by marrying Caroline Westfield, whose family controlled 3 seats on the Boston Symphony Board and whose bloodline dated back to the Mayflower. Instead, he had shattered tradition. During a business trip to revitalize struggling rural economies, his car had broken down in Greenwood. There, at a local cafe owned by a woman with an economics degree and no family connections, James Harrison had found something his family had never valued: authenticity. Olivia stood near the century-old fireplace, her simple beige dress a conscious choice rather than a limitation. The modest silver bracelet with its single blue stone represented their first anniversary, before his software company exploded in value, before the Harrison name appeared on Forbes lists, back when they were simply 2 people who recognized something rare in each other. "That's her? James's wife?" whispered Elizabeth, Sarah's bridge partner of 30 years. 3 years later, and she still hasn't adapted. Sarah tells me she suggested they donate to public schools instead of renovating the family's Cape Cod compound. Claire, who had lost her presumed position as the family's social director after James married outside their circle, approached with tight lips masquerading as a smile. "Olivia, I see you've come in your everyday clothes again." Her eyes narrowed, the resentment barely concealed. When Mother specifically mentioned formal attire in the invitation, the tension wasn't merely about clothing. It was about a family whose identity had been built on exclusivity suddenly confronted by an outsider who questioned their fundamental values. James had been the heir apparent, the golden son destined to expand the Harrison influence. His choice of Olivia had been seen not just as a poor match, but as a betrayal of dynastic responsibility. Olivia smiled warmly, her eyes reflecting not insecurity, but a quiet confidence born from knowing exactly who she was. What these self-appointed guardians of tradition couldn't possibly understand was that their carefully constructed world of artificial values was about to be shaken to its foundation. As Olivia made her way through the gathering, she felt the weight of judgmental stares following her every move. The room wasn't particularly grand, just tastefully decorated with quality furniture and artwork that spoke of generational wealth. But the invisible wall between her and the Harrison family felt as impenetrable as fortress walls. "Would you like some appetizers?" offered a server. Before Olivia could answer, Claire interjected, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, I'm sure she would. Olivia's always had quite the appetite for things that don't belong to her." Several nearby relatives exchanged knowing glances, their soft laughter cutting like carefully sharpened knives. 3 years of marriage to James, and the barbs still came with practiced precision. It wasn't just about her simple clothes anymore. It was about everything she represented to them, an outsider who had infiltrated their carefully curated world, threatening traditions passed down through generations of calculated marriages and social alliances. Olivia reached for a stuffed mushroom, her hand steady despite the undercurrent of hostility. "These look delicious. Sarah always has the best caterers." "It's called having standards, dear," Claire replied, raising her voice just enough to ensure the surrounding guests could hear. "Something you might want to consider. Though I suppose it's difficult when you come from, where was it again? That little town outside Pittsburgh?" "Greenwood," Olivia answered calmly, refusing to match Claire's tone. "It's actually a lovely place." "Right, where James's car broke down that weekend. How terribly convenient." Claire's eyes narrowed with practiced disdain. "One broken down car, and suddenly our James is married to the local waitress." Uncle Richard joined them, martini in hand. His eyes, kinder than most in the room, registered the tension. "Ladies, perhaps we could save the debate for another time. It is Sarah's birthday celebration after all." He offered a small, sympathetic smile to Olivia. "Speaking of James," Richard continued, attempting to shift the conversation, "when do you expect him to arrive?" "He had an unexpected meeting. He'll be here soon," Olivia explained, grateful for the momentary reprieve, though she knew it wouldn't last. "Another meeting," Sarah Harrison sighed as she approached, her designer dress rustling softly against the carpet. The matriarch's disapproving gaze fell on Olivia like a cold shadow. "I suppose we should be grateful you made it, even if you didn't think the occasion warranted anything special." Her eyes flicked dismissively over Olivia's simple dress, the gesture more eloquent than words. "I'm sorry if my appearance disappoints you, Sarah. I chose this because clearly what's important to this family isn't important to you," Claire cut in, moving closer like a predator sensing weakness. "Mother's milestone birthday, and you couldn't even make an effort." A circle had formed around them now, with several cousins and aunts watching the spectacle with barely concealed delight. Olivia felt the room closing in, the air growing thinner as they tightened their social noose. "I didn't mean any disrespect," Olivia said, her voice clear despite her quickening pulse. "I just believe that's always been your problem," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying across the now quieting room. "You believe you know better than the traditions this family has maintained for generations. Tell me, what exactly did you bring to this marriage besides taking my son away from us?" A heavy silence fell, oppressive and expectant. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one intervened, witnesses to the social execution, but unwilling to stop it. "I love your son," Olivia said simply, her vulnerability becoming strength in its honesty. "And he loves me." A ripple of scornful laughter spread through the group, the sound echoing against the family portraits that lined the walls. Generations of Harrisons looking down at this latest challenge to their dynasty. Richard stepped forward again, discomfort evident in his posture. "I think we're getting a bit carried away here. Sarah, it's your special day." "No, Richard, it needs to be said," Claire insisted, her voice rising as she stepped closer to Olivia. "What exactly do you contribute, besides spending our family's money?" Olivia swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "I don't actually—" "Oh, please," Sarah cut in, maternal protectiveness twisted into something sharp and exclusionary. "We all know about the charity donations, the foundation work. Playing philanthropist with Harrison money doesn't make you one of us." A cousin Olivia barely knew joined in, emboldened by the pack mentality that had overtaken the room. "Remember last Christmas? She tried to suggest we donate our gift budget to some homeless shelter." The memory of that dinner flashed through Olivia's mind. Her hopeful suggestion met with stunned silence, followed by dismissive laughter. Another in a long line of attempts to bridge a gulf that seemed to widen with every effort. "Perhaps," Olivia suggested, her voice soft but clear as crystal in the hushed room. "There's more to life than appearances and traditions that hurt others." Claire's face flushed with anger, the carefully applied blush now secondary to the genuine color rising beneath it. "There it is, that holier-than-thou attitude. You've never belonged here, and you never will. I think it's time you stop pretending." "That's enough, Claire," Richard said firmly, but his intervention came too late. The room had fallen completely silent now. Dozens of eyes watched, waiting for Olivia's reaction, the tension thick enough to cut with the sterling silver butter knives on the nearby table. "Perhaps you're right about one thing," Olivia admitted, her voice surprisingly steady as she stood her ground. "I didn't grow up in this world, but that doesn't mean—" "It means," Sarah interrupted coldly, delivering the final blow with the precision of someone accustomed to getting her way, "that maybe this party would be better if you waited for James elsewhere." The implied dismissal hung in the air like a slap, the collective intake of breath from the onlookers, the only sound breaking the silence. Olivia stood there, feeling the weight of 3 years of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. Every family dinner, every holiday, every celebration had been the same. Sideways glances, whispered comments, thinly veiled insults. She had endured it all with grace for James's sake, hoping that someday they might see beyond her simple upbringing. But now, being publicly humiliated at Sarah's birthday party, she felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not resentment, but a quiet sadness for people who measured worth by appearance and pedigree rather than character. Still, she held her head high, knowing the truth that none of them did. But what happened next, no one in the room could have anticipated. The oak door opened, silencing the room. James Harrison stood framed in the entrance, his tailored suit slightly rumpled from a day's work. The afternoon light cast his silhouette in sharp relief against the polished woodwork of his family's ancestral home. James, finally, Sarah's voice transformed instantly, the frost melting into warmth reserved only for her son. We were just discussing how Olivia seems to misunderstand certain family traditions. Claire's fingers smoothed her silk dress. Perhaps you can explain to your wife why Mother's birthday deserves more respect than she's shown. The room tensed, expecting James's usual passionate defense. Instead, his eyes found Olivia's across the space, a private conversation in a public arena. Years of shared resilience passed between them in that glance. He crossed to her with deliberate steps and simply took her hand in his. The gesture spoke volumes in its quiet defiance. "I heard what was being said," he said, his voice calm, yet somehow commanding the room's complete attention. Something was different about James today. A new edge to his posture, a hardness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. The family shifted uncomfortably, sensing the change without understanding its source. James's expression remained completely neutral, his face an unreadable mask that unnerved the gathering far more than any display of emotion would have. His patience with these charades had clearly reached its breaking point. "Mother," he said after a weighted silence, his tone carrying an undercurrent of steel, "would you mind if I made an announcement? I think it's relevant to this discussion." Sarah's hand fluttered to her pearls, catching the unfamiliar tension in her son's voice. "Of course, dear. There's something about my wife that this family needs to understand," he said, each word measured and deliberate, as his gaze moved from face to judgmental face. The controlled intensity in his unwavering stare made several relatives shift in their seats. "Something I've kept private at Olivia's request, but that I think it's time everyone knew." The grandfather clock's ticking filled the absolute stillness. Claire's champagne glass trembled slightly as she recognized something dangerous brewing beneath her brother's eerily composed exterior. "What exactly do you mean?" Sarah asked, unable to mask her uncertainty, a flicker of apprehension crossing her face. What secret could possibly warrant this strange, almost predatory stillness? James remained perfectly composed, not a trace of emotion crossing his features, as he surveyed the room with the detached assessment of someone who had finally decided to overturn the board rather than continue playing a rigged game. "It's about who Olivia really is," he said simply, his voice dropping to a near whisper that forced everyone to lean forward involuntarily. "And I think it's going to change how you see things." He paused, letting the mystery hang in the air. "It certainly changed everything for me." All eyes fixed on James as he stood beside Olivia, the grandfather clock's ticking echoing like a countdown to Judgment Day. The air crackled with tension as everyone waited, sensing something monumental was about to break. "For years," James began, his voice deceptively calm, but with an undercurrent of steel, "I've bitten my tongue while listening to your comments about how Olivia trapped me, how she lucked into the Harrison fortune, how she brings nothing of value to this precious family legacy." Claire flinched as James's gaze cut to her, sharp as a surgeon's blade. "What none of you bothered to learn, what your privilege never allowed you to see beyond your prejudice, was who Olivia really was." His hand found his wife's, fingers interlocking in solidarity. "When my car broke down in Greenwood, I wasn't the CEO you all worship now. I was drowning in debt with a failing startup that was weeks away from bankruptcy." A ripple of uncomfortable movement passed through the gathered relatives. "That little coffee shop where you assume Olivia served lattes? She owned it, and 3 others across the state." His words carried a quiet fury now. "The woman you've been treating like hired help was already supporting 15 employees and funding college scholarships before she ever knew my last name." Sarah's aristocratic mask slipped. "But the Harrison fortune would be half what it is today without her," James cut in, his voice hardening. "That investment strategy that saved us during the recession, Olivia created it while your precious board members were panicking. The Westbrook acquisition that doubled our market share, She identified the opportunity while your country club friends said it was impossible. Uncle Richard nodded slowly in reluctant acknowledgement. But she never speaks during family business meetings, Claire protested weakly. Because you silenced her, James snapped, the restraint finally cracking in his voice. She tried 3 times to contribute, and each time you talked over her, dismissed her, or changed the subject. This family has specialized in silencing voices that don't fit your narrow definition of belonging for generations. Olivia squeezed his hand, not to calm him, but in solidarity. The Harrison Foundation's hospital wing being announced tomorrow, James continued, his voice rising with controlled intensity. The $30 million funding it? That didn't come from our family trust. His eyes blazed with fierce pride. It came from my wife's personal account. The collective gasp seemed to suck all oxygen from the room. Personal account? Sarah whispered, her voice fragile with disbelief. Olivia sold her business last year for 8 figures, James revealed without softening the blow. She's been managing her own investment portfolio since she was 22. My wife has never touched the Harrison money you've been so concerned about her taking. She doesn't need your charity or your approval. Aunt Patricia broke the stunned silence. Then why does she dress so simply? Olivia finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying an authority that commanded attention. Because I recognize the difference between worth and value. My parents, a teacher and a factory worker, taught me that character isn't determined by labels or price tags. She touched her simple dress. This wasn't bought at a department store. It's handcrafted by women from the shelter I established in Pittsburgh, where survivors of domestic violence learn sustainable skills and economic independence. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for support. Your designer clothes and jewelry are beautiful, Olivia continued, her gentleness somehow more devastating than any anger. But they're not measures of achievement or character. They're just things purchased with inherited privilege. Claire looked physically struck, her carefully constructed reality visibly shattering. I never wanted to embarrass anyone, Olivia added. I kept my background private because I wanted to be accepted for who I am, not what I own. I wanted to belong because of human connection, not financial status. James surveyed the room, his jaw tight with barely contained emotion. The next time you decide to humiliate someone based on assumptions about their worth, remember this moment. Remember how wrong you were. Remember the judgment you passed without a shred of actual knowledge. He turned to his mother, whose legendary composure had dissolved completely. Happy birthday, Mother. Your gift is in the car. That Monet you've coveted for decades. Olivia acquired it last month. She negotiated with the previous owners directly. Throughout the opulent room, faces transformed in a tableau of revelation and shame. Claire's complexion turned alabaster, her lips parting soundlessly as her fingers clutched her glass like a lifeline. Sarah, the unshakable matriarch of Boston society, sank slowly into a chair as though her legs could no longer support the weight of her misjudgments. Cousins who had earlier exchanged knowing smirks now couldn't meet each other's eyes, creating distance between themselves as if to separate from their previous cruelty. And Aunt Margaret, who had perfected the art of looking through Olivia at family functions, now stared directly at her with a mixture of awe and profound embarrassment, her fingers nervously working her heirloom pearls like worry beads. All shared a single devastating realization. They had consistently humiliated and underestimated a woman whose financial power, business acumen, and moral compass far exceeded their own. Sarah Harrison, who had orchestrated social takedowns and family interventions with surgical precision for decades, found herself, for the first time in her privileged life, completely and utterly speechless. The birthday celebration continued, but in an atmosphere transformed beyond recognition. Where there had been rigid formality, now hung an air of genuine reflection. The Harrisons' elegant living room no longer felt like a fortress of privilege, but a space where authentic connections might finally take root. Sarah was the first to break the weighted silence. Rising slowly from her chair, she crossed to Olivia with newfound humility, softening her aristocratic features. I've been wrong about you, she admitted, her voice steadier than her hands. For years, I've held on to judgments that weren't just unfair, they were entirely unfounded. Olivia's gentle nod of acceptance carried more dignity than any speech could have conveyed. Claire approached next, the earlier confidence replaced by genuine discomfort. The women's cooperative you mentioned, I'd like to learn more about it. Perhaps there's something I could contribute. Across the room, conversations shifted from social gossip to meaningful exchange. Uncle Richard engaged Olivia about sustainable business practices, while other relatives, who had previously avoided her, now sought her perspective with newfound respect. As evening shadows lengthened across the Persian rugs, the family gathering had transformed into something none of them had experienced before, an exchange based on substance rather than status. Later, as James and Olivia prepared to leave, several family members approached with genuine inquiries about her work. Even Aunt Margaret requested her card, mentioning a community project that might benefit from her expertise. Outside in the cool Boston evening, James helped Olivia into their car, the city lights reflecting off the windshield. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That real change isn't about forcing others to see your worth," she replied. "It's about standing in your truth long enough that they finally recognize what was always there." They drove away from the Harrison estate, leaving behind a family beginning the uncomfortable but necessary work of examining the foundations upon which they had built their identity. Sometimes, the most powerful legacies aren't the ones we inherit, but the ones we choose to create. My goodness, did your heart fill with joy when James stood by Olivia's side? Ladies, if you love that beautiful moment of loyalty and respect between husband and wife, hit that subscribe button right now. What makes our stories special is that we celebrate true partnership, not drama or betrayal. In a world full of stories about cheating spouses and bitter divorces, we bring you something refreshingly different. Couples who honor each other, stand together against judgment, and show what real love looks like. Wasn't it just wonderful to see a husband who not only treasures his wife's character, but celebrates her accomplishments? That's the kind of uplifting relationship we showcase every week. Marriages built on mutual respect, fidelity, and genuine admiration. We'd love to know where in America you're watching from. Are you enjoying our stories from sunny Florida or snowy Minnesota? Perhaps you're in bustling New York or peaceful Montana. Drop a comment below telling us your state or city. We're creating a map of our wonderful community of viewers. Don't forget to hit that notification bell. Next week's story will warm your heart with another tale of a devoted couple who proved that true love isn't just about romance. It's about honoring each other through life's challenges. And if you know someone who believes in the beauty of faithful marriages and respectful partnerships, please share this video with them. In a cynical world, these stories remind us that dignified, loving relationships still exist. Until next time, remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's found in relationships where both partners lift each other up. See you next week for another story that celebrates the kind of marriage we all deserve.